Jack stepped into the gleaming conference room, his confidence oozing as he flashed a grin that had won over entire planets. At least, that's what he liked to think. He adjusted his collar and casually leaned against the table. In front of him, a dozen alien delegates from across the galaxy sat, each wearing expressions that ranged from stoic to bemused. Jax didn't care much for formality. He had a job to do: represent Earth, shake hands, smooth over the awkwardness of being a human in a room full of aliens, and of course, make sure everyone liked him in the process. As usual, he felt the weight of his self-assurance pressing down like a heavy jacket. He was here, after all, to handle high-stakes diplomacy. What could go wrong? He cleared his throat and prepared his opening line. So, how about we get down to business? His voice was charming, confident, maybe a little too confident. He leaned forward just a bit too much, and when the words left his mouth, he saw the eyes of the delegates flicker in response. No matter how many alien races he met, there was always that awkward moment when they realized, despite his charisma, he had absolutely no idea what was going on. It didn't help that the meeting was supposed to be an intergalactic trade discussion, but the mood was tense, and everyone was clearly on edge. They wanted peace, but peace between such different species was never simple. It always started with one weird issue that needed to be resolved before they could talk about anything else. Jax tried to relax, but a sudden shiver ran down his spine when one of the delegates, a large, shadowy figure with what looked like bioluminescent tattoos, spoke up. "Human, your species has much to answer for." The alien's voice rumbled, as deep and menacing as a thunderstorm. Jax blinked. "I'm sorry, but what?" Jax laughed nervously. "I mean, we're really good at negotiating, right?" He threw an exaggerated glance around the room, but no one joined in on the joke. He mentally cursed himself for getting off track. Before the situation could worsen, the door to the conference room slid open, and a tall, imposing figure stepped in. The moment Jack saw them, a jolt of recognition ran through him. Zilrith. An alien diplomat who had an unsettling reputation for being far too efficient, far too intimidating, and far too attractive for his own good. Zilrith's tall, sleek figure glided across the floor, their steps as graceful as they were deliberate. Their glowing eyes fixed on Jax for a second, and a flash of something that could have been amusement flickered across their face. It wasn't often that a human walked into a room full of alien diplomats, but Jax had always been the type to make a grand entrance. Maybe a little too grand. "Apologies for the delay." Zilrith's voice was cool and calm, as they took their seat next to Jax, towering over him by several inches. "The matter we are discussing today is far more important than simple trade." Jax didn't know how to respond. Trade? He thought this was supposed to be a negotiation about peaceful relations, not some convoluted trade deal. But before he could comment, Zilrith leaned forward and spoke directly to him. "You are the representative of Earth, correct?" Zilrith's eyes gleamed with a kind of dangerous intrigue. "Why, yeah, that's me," Jax replied, his usual charm faltering for a moment. He knew what was coming next. They always did this. The aliens loved to poke fun at humans. Always the curious species. Always the ones who didn't get the nuances. Zilrith gave a slight nod, and their lips curled into a smile that seemed far too knowing. "Then, human, we have other matters to discuss." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Other matters?" He started to feel the weight of the situation pressing in on him. Something about the way Zilrith said it made his stomach twist. "Yes," Zilrith purred. "You and I have become connected in a way your species does not fully comprehend." The alien's tone was soft, almost teasing, but the undertones were heavy, like a weight settling in Jax's chest. "Connected?" Jax laughed nervously. "Well, sure. You know, we're all connected in some way, right? I mean, this is intergalactic diplomacy, after all. We're talking about unity, about peace." He tried to steer the conversation back on track, but Zilrith wasn't having it. A quiet murmur passed through the delegates as they exchanged glances, clearly aware of what was about to unfold. Zilrith leaned closer, their voice dropping to a more intimate, almost conspiratorial tone. Human, it's complicated. I'm pregnant with your child. Jax blinked. Wait, what? Yes. Pregnant. By you. Silrith continued, as though they were discussing the weather. And according to my people's laws, once an alien has impregnated another species, they are legally bound together. For life. The room went deathly quiet. All eyes were on Jax, who could only stare at Silrith, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He was here to charm, to negotiate, to be the human bridge between worlds, not this. Wait, hold on. Jax managed to stammer, still processing the impossible revelation. Pregnant? Me? He waved his hands in an exaggerated, nervous gesture. I mean, I don't even. How does that even? What the hell is going on? Silrith tilted their heads slightly, as though trying to understand Jax's confusion. You are bound to me now, human. Not just emotionally, but in a legal and political sense. The child must be recognized, and our bond must be formalized. Jax blinked several times. Okay, wait a minute. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. So, you're telling me that I'm what? I've got a kid on the way. And now we're in some cosmic, legal, lifelong partnership thing? The humor was starting to creep into his voice now. If he didn't laugh, he might just cry. I didn't even think I was that good in bed. Zilritha's face remained stoic, but Jax could see the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. They'd clearly anticipated his response. Your charm is legendary, human. But it seems you have underestimated the consequences of your actions. The room erupted in whispers and chuckles from the delegates. Jax's reputation as an irresistible human was no longer just a charming trait, it was a full-blown political liability. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or pull out the nearest escape pod. Well, Jax said with a sigh, running a hand through his hair. Guess I'm in it for the long haul now. Silrith didn't respond, but their knowing smile said everything. Jax was knee-deep in paperwork, and he couldn't shake the feeling that everything around him was slowly spinning out of control. Alien contracts, bonding rituals, intergalactic bureaucracy. It was more than any one human was meant to handle. But here he was, sitting at a desk designed for 3 beings with tentacles and another set of eyes, filling out forms that might as well have been written in an ancient alien dialect for all the sense they made to him. The first form was straightforward enough, something about confirming his identity and position as a representative of Earth. The next, however, was a maze of questions that made his head spin. Do you acknowledge the legal bond that binds you to Zilrith? That was the first real question that hit him. It wasn't a simple yes or no deal. No, this form had a lengthy disclaimer about the nature of the bond, the political implications, and, of course, the lifelong commitment to Zilrith's species. And somehow, it made perfect sense to every alien who had their own way of interpreting these documents. The human was the only one stumbling through the red tape like a clueless child. Jax sighed and scratched the back of his neck. Well, yes. I acknowledge it. I think. But I'm still a little confused about the whole thing. He stared down at the form again, the words blurring into a confusing mess. Lifelong commitment, political influence, spirit bond. What's next? Do I have to take out a cosmic mortgage to pay for this mess? He chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but the room was silent, and he realized the joke was lost on every delegate in the room. The form continued, each section more convoluted than the last. Jax felt the headache coming on. In the back of his mind, he wondered if Zilrith was watching him struggle on purpose, some sort of intergalactic initiation test. He could almost hear their voice in his head, saying something cryptic like, "The human must learn the ways of our people, and only through understanding shall they gain wisdom." But no, this wasn't some deep cosmic journey. This was alien bureaucracy at its worst. He flipped to the next page and froze. The question in bold letters stopped him cold. Do you accept the duties and responsibilities of a lifelong bond with Zilrith, including but not limited to legal representation, cultural integration, and co-parenting duties as prescribed by the bonded union protocol? Jax's mind raced. Co-parenting duties? What did that even mean? Sure, he'd made a joke about knocking up Zilrith, but he hadn't exactly signed up for a full-on parental role. He hadn't been briefed on what intergalactic co-parenting looked like. What if their species didn't even have parenting styles? What if it was just weird alien stuff he wasn't prepared for? Jax stared at the page, his hand frozen above the tablet. Okay, he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. Co-parenting. Sure. I'm in a diplomatic bond with an alien diplomat, and now I'm gonna be a cosmic parent. Why not add that to the list of things I never thought I'd be doing? The paperwork seemed to be endless. Each form demanded more and more commitment from him, things that ranged from the laughably mundane to the downright absurd. One form asked about the proper, ceremonial gestures, to express his commitment to Zilrith's people. The options ranged from physical gestures like holding hands, which, at this point, seemed harmless enough, to more intimate rituals that involved a series of synchronized movements meant to symbolize unity. Jax blushed at the thought of it. What if he got it wrong? What if he made a fool of himself in front of Zilrith's entire species? The pressure was mounting. He glanced up at the nearest delegate, an angular creature with sharp features and a long, sinuous neck. It watched him with an air of detached curiosity, clearly unbothered by the absurdity of the paperwork. It wasn't just the forms, though. It was the implications. What would happen if he screwed this up? What if this bond wasn't just some legal agreement? What if it was actually a trap, a set of cosmic ropes designed to drag him deeper into alien politics? Hey, Jax said, looking at the delegate. Tell me, what exactly am I supposed to do here? I'm supposed to sign up for all these duties, but it doesn't really explain what that entails. What if I don't get this right? What if I mess up the co-parenting thing? The delegate's expression was inscrutable, its features a mix of indifference and curiosity. It was clear that Jax's concerns weren't something they were used to hearing. The bond is sacred, human. You do not get to choose the consequences of your failure. But you must also understand that the benefits outweigh any potential difficulties. For you and for your species. Jax bit his lip, holding back a sarcastic comment. He knew they weren't going to give him a straight answer. This was alien diplomacy, after all. He wasn't supposed to question the process. He was supposed to accept it and move on. But that was the problem. He didn't want to move on. He needed clarity, and fast. Zilrith's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. They were standing in the doorway now, watching him work through the forms, looking almost pleased. How is the paperwork, human? Have you come to an understanding of your new responsibilities? Jax turned to face them, his mind still buzzing with confusion. Responsibilities? Oh, I've got a good grasp on the responsibilities, mostly. I mean, I'm supposed to be bound to you now, and in some ways I think that means I'm also supposed to help raise your kid? But what's next? What does that really mean? He gestured at the forms, his frustration leaking into his tone. This is a lot more complicated than I thought. Zilrith's lips twitched into the slightest of smiles. You will learn, human. And once you do, you will understand why this bond is not just a personal matter. It is the beginning of a new era for both of our species. The bond is not only political but is a symbol of the future. A future where I'm stuck in an eternal partnership with an alien diplomat, and raising a kid. Jax muttered, the sarcasm practically dripping from his voice. Great. Sounds like the beginning of a Hollywood romance. Just without the happy ending. Zilrith's eyes flickered, though their expression remained stoic. Perhaps. But remember, human, you are a representative of Earth. This bond strengthens your species' position in the galaxy. You should be honored by this connection. Jax looked at Zilrith for a moment, his mind swirling. There was no going back now. He had committed, whether he liked it or not. It wasn't about understanding it all at once. It was about getting through the next moment and making it work. He couldn't afford to overthink it. But still, there was that lingering voice in his mind, one that whispered that this was all a little too much. All right, Jax finally said, his voice resigned. I guess we'll do it your way. But one thing's for sure, I didn't sign up to be a political pawn. So, just make sure that when this kid grows up, they understand that their dad, me, was always too human for this galaxy. Zilritha's gaze softened, just for a moment. You may find that your humanity is exactly what this galaxy needs, human. Jax exhaled, not sure whether to be relieved or terrified. Jax wasn't sure when the paperwork had stopped being funny and started feeling like a massive weight on his chest. He had managed to get through some of the more ridiculous questions that felt like they belonged in a bad space opera, not an actual diplomatic situation. But now, as he sat there, pen in hand, staring at yet another form, the reality of what he'd gotten himself into started to sink in. The last few days had been a blur of alien customs, diplomatic meetings, and what felt like an endless barrage of forms. He had passed through each stage with the same half-hearted humor he had relied on to get him this far. It was easy, at first, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. An intergalactic bonding ritual, a lifelong commitment to an alien diplomat, and now this, parental duties? The more Jax thought about it, the less sure he was about his ability to pull this off. He wasn't some galactic power player. He was just a human who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. There was still that lingering question, what was he supposed to do now? This was no longer just about avoiding alien political disaster. This was about his life being tied up in ways he never expected. Zilrith was serious about this. So serious, in fact, that the very thought of backing out didn't even seem like a possibility anymore. He was in, for better or worse. And then there was the kid. His kid. In some ways, that was the weirdest part of all this. Jax could hardly wrap his mind around the fact that he was going to be a parent. Sure, it wasn't entirely his fault, he hadn't planned on this, but somehow, it seemed like a cosmic joke. Here he was, supposed to guide Earth through some kind of intergalactic responsibility, and he was expected to raise a child with an alien species. A child with Zilrith. How did a human even begin to prepare for that? The forms on the table in front of him weren't making anything easier. Each document felt like another level of commitment he wasn't sure he was ready to make. There were stipulations about cultural integration, about participating in rituals and traditions that had no meaning to him, yet somehow, they carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He was bound, in every sense of the word. It didn't help that the entire situation felt like it was spiraling out of control in the most absurd way possible. Jax knew that if he didn't handle this right, things could go south fast. He had no idea what being a parent meant in Zilritha's species. What if they had radically different ways of raising kids? What if they had no concept of parenting at all? The entire situation felt like it was completely outside his understanding of reality. It wasn't just the paperwork that bothered him, though. It was the constant pressure to prove that he could handle this, handle everything. As a representative of Earth, he was expected to be the model of composure, the perfect face for diplomacy. But inside, Jax was still just a guy from a relatively small planet trying to make his way in a galaxy full of vastly more advanced species. Sure, humanity had done well for itself, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all way above his pay grade. The thought of confronting Zilrith about it all seemed equally daunting. As much as he liked to think of himself as a smooth talker, Zilrith had a way of making even the simplest conversation feel like a strategic negotiation. They were used to controlling situations, used to making others fall in line, while Jax was used to getting by on charm and the occasional joke. He hadn't exactly been trained to handle cosmic law or alien family rituals. Yet here he was, stuck with the weight of both. As if on cue, Zilrith appeared in the doorway, their eyes gleaming with that unsettling calm. They took in the scene for a moment, watching Jack struggle with the forms, before stepping inside with a quiet authority that made everything feel even more overwhelming. "You seem troubled, human," Zilrith said, their voice as smooth as ever. "Have you come to understand the weight of what you have agreed to?" Jack sighed and set the tablet down. He couldn't keep pretending like this was just some joke. It was real. It was happening. Yeah, I've got a pretty good grasp on what I'm in for, he said, rubbing his eyes. But honestly, I don't think I'm cut out for all of this. I mean, what's next? How am I supposed to raise a kid with someone from another species? A species that has a completely different understanding of, well, everything? Zilrith didn't flinch. This is not about what you are cut out for, human. It is about what is necessary for the future of both our species. You must adapt, just as we have adapted to your presence. The calmness in Zilrith's voice made Jax bristle. It was easy for them to talk about adaptation when they had centuries of advanced culture to fall back on. Adapt? You mean, just pretend like everything is normal? I'm not some cosmic diplomat. I don't know how to raise an alien kid. You will learn, Zilrith replied, their tone matter-of-fact. Much like your species has learned to navigate the complexities of space and intergalactic relations. This will not be different. It will require patience and understanding, but it is not an insurmountable challenge. You may even find that your human traits will make you more suited to this than you think. Jax shot Zilrith a skeptical look. Human traits? You mean like the fact that I'm pretty much winging it every step of the way? Zilrith paused for a moment, their gaze softening ever so slightly. Your species is unpredictable, yes. But that is part of your strength. You see things differently than we do, and sometimes that perspective is exactly what is needed. This bond will change both of us, in ways neither of us can predict. But it is necessary. For both our people. Jax ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his thoughts. And the kid? What happens then? Zilrith's expression shifted, becoming more serious. We will raise the child together, human. As parents. As partners. You are not alone in this. Jax wasn't sure if that made him feel better or worse. He was supposed to be in this, for life. He would never be free of the consequences of this mistake, even if he didn't understand all of them yet. There was no escape route. No easy way out. But Zilrith was right about one thing, this bond wasn't just about him. It wasn't about his confusion, or his fear. It was about something much bigger. Whether he was ready for it or not, this was the path forward. And he had to walk it. He met Zilrith's gaze, feeling the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders. All right, he said quietly. I'll do it. I'll do my best. Zilrith nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. Good. That is all I ask? Jax stood up, taking a deep breath. There was no going back. He had made his choice. And now, for better or worse, he was bound to it.